Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything. Geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to you live from New York City, your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Porkins Policy Radio. As always, I am your host, Pierce Redmond, and you can find this show here at American Freedom Radio, AmericanFreedomRadio.com, as well as on my website, which is PorkinsPolicyReview.com. And you can also find this rebroadcast later in the week on a bunch of other stations, so and of course on YouTube and some other places as well. But you can find all of that either here at AFR or on my website. Very quick note, apologies if you hear some background noise. Con Ed is digging up my corner, and they've got jackhammers and a bunch of other stuff like that, and the power has been on and off all day, but hopefully that should not affect what I hope will be a really interesting follow-up episode to our episode that we did about 2 weeks ago on JonBenet Ramsey. We are joined once again by a good friend of the show, Stephen Singular, and also joined by his wife and writing partner, Joyce. So, Stephen and Joyce, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having
us, Pierce.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I mean, obviously, all my listeners know Stephen quite well, but Joyce, why don't you give us a little background on who is Joyce Singular and everything like that.
Well, about 20 years ago, I started working with Steve on different high-profile murder cases. At the time, we were starting our family, and we had a young child, and but we had to divide sometimes, and I'd have to cover a murder trial, say, up in the mountains, while Steve was writing the OJ book. And at the time, I was doing a lot of research with him into books like the OJ Simpson case and the JonBenet Ramsey case. But since we had a young child, we felt it was better for me to kind of stay in the background, because at the time, during the climate of those cases, we weren't exactly sure what was going to be happening, and so it was better for me to remain in the background. And then, so when the JonBenet Ramsey case started, I had seen of course it was covered in the papers at first, before it became a national story. And because our son was about 3 years younger than JonBenet, it really caught my attention, because we only live 30 miles from Boulder, and I thought, wow, if someone is out there that they're breaking into people's houses and killing their child while their parents are sleeping, that got my attention. And I said, we really should look into this story. And that's how my involvement with the Ramsey case began.
Excellent, excellent. And of course, anyone who has read Presumed Guilty, which is Stephen's book on JonBenet, Joyce, you feature prominently throughout the book. Different parts, researching, and you were very involved in the case itself. So maybe before we kind of dive into some specifics, give us your kind of general perspective on the case, how it affected you, and maybe looking at it, now 20 years on.
Well, originally, we found that when we partnered up together and we began interviewing people, especially the pageant mothers, we noticed that they seemed to have it was easier in a way, because it wasn't as threatening than just having a male journalist asking them questions. There was a woman now present, and we had a little family, and so we didn't appear as much as a threat, and people started opening up, especially women. The pageant mothers, they told us of their experiences, ones that had actually been in the same pageants with JonBenet. And that led us eventually to go down. One of the local news anchors was going to have a hacker at one of the local television stations one night. So I went with Steve, and that's where we saw them go into these sites that average people couldn't get into. And of course, this is the infancy of the internet. And I saw, along with Steve and some other people that were present, when he put in the name JonBenet Ramsey, there was like a feeding frenzy, and there were, do you have pictures of JonBenet? Do you have pictures alive or dead? And there were other pictures of little children kind of done up in the same fashion that JonBenet was found, with things around their neck or in bondage types of photos. And it totally stunned us. We had no idea that this was going on at that level and buried, in the underground of the internet. So that's when Stephen, Eric, and I went up to Boulder. I went with Steve to Alex Hunter's office. I stayed in the lobby with my son while Steve went in to start giving him information about what we were finding out. Alex Hunter came out, shook my hand. Again, we were presenting ourselves as a small family unit, and I think it opened up people's trust began to kind of alter a little bit, rather than just having a single male journalist asking questions and interviewing.
Absolutely, and again, that will come across to everybody as they read the book. Both of you are able to get some pretty amazing admissions from people, and people do seem to want to open up to you about this case. And of course, there's so many different layers to all of this. But I wanted to have both of you on to kind of, fill in some of the blanks on some stuff that we didn't get to cover the last episode, and and also maybe answer some listener questions. But one thing that I did want to touch on briefly here in the beginning that we didn't get to last time around is this bizarre case of this city employee who was allegedly caught with porn and other sexually explicit material in his desk. Some of it might have been child related. And he's fired, or he's not. No, excuse me. He's not fired. He's moved around. And later on in the book, Stephen, it's in chapter 16, you actually go and speak with him at length. And I kind of wanted to get both of your guys' take on this, because I think it illustrates again more of the environment that seemed to be operating in Boulder, where you'd have a fairly prominent city official caught in some sort of a scandal, and it's sort of hushed up, and he's moved around, and it's sort of like end of story. So explain, who is this person, and what exactly were they accused of?
Well, part of what's important about that is that there's a pattern that kind of runs through the case, and I think we'll get to it later on. Joyce, I think maybe earlier we talked about some poems that were sent in to a lawyer in this case that tried to convey some information to sort of get it up the ladder of the legal system to get them to look at things. And in that case, it was looking at some sexual activities involving children. What's interesting about this particular thing is that I was approached by a couple of so-called activists in Boulder, and they told me about this situation and how it had been basically covered up or hushed up, as you said, some years ago. And it was a high city official, and they felt that it needed to be looked into a lot more, and that it might have some connection, maybe some tangential connection to the case. One of the individuals who approached was a doctor, and some of the significance of that was that, he was privy to certain kinds of information, perhaps information about children who had been abused and things like that. And he was very concerned. I mean, he was a very sincere guy. They both were. And they strongly encouraged me to go in and basically interview this guy and see if I could learn anything. It was a very, very awkward situation. But, as a journalist, I thought it was part of the job, and I went in, I talked to him. He became extremely embarrassed and defensive and denied what I was saying. Well, I actually didn't deny the parts of it that you just raised, but any connection to the Ramsey case. Later that night, he called me back, and he said, do you really think that this case has something to do with child exploitation or child pornography? And, we kicked that around a little bit. Then, not long after that, he moved to France. And again, more than the specific incident, it kind of sets in motion a pattern here of people trying to come forward with information to the authorities and having a hard time. As we talked about earlier, the grand jury started in this case. District Attorney Alex Hunter set a grand jury starting in August of 1998, and it went on for this very long 13 months. My book came out during that period of time, and those activists felt that it was that particular chapter that you're referring to was important enough that it should have been in front of the grand jury. They actually made copies of that chapter. They actually tried to get it into the legal system in front of the grand jury as possibly pertinent testimony, and they were, of course, shot down. So it's the start of a pattern of people in Boulder with knowledge of certain things. Joyce can talk more about this in relation to the poems, trying basically to convey information, and it always seems to get knocked down. So it is important.
And see, the reason that we ended up with the poems, other people did too, a few other people, was that this particular attorney had heard Steve's theory about, a third scenario, and he was on television, and he kind of put it out there, and people came forward, and he got these series of poems sent to him, and then he gave them to us. And I mean, we didn't put all of them in the revised ebook, but you can kind of see that there's some sort of undercurrent, and whoever wrote these poems was very sophisticated and put a lot of thought and time into this, sent them anonymously, but they're very clever and they're very well worded. And for example, at the beginning, it says, "This is not the author," and these are all typewritten, not handwritten. "This is not the author of the original poem. Recidivism is my only concern. You are the only one who has a copy of this. Please respect my anonymity. People who abuse children are terrorists too." And then it went on to these are quite extensive, so I'm just going to put a couple of stanzas in. "In his cocky reverie, the truth the three would carry to the steps of the authority to boast of their pernicious spree. But he did not know that I could see, and therefore was not wary." So they imply that, they know something, they can't come out and say it. And this is the kind of climate that followed us and others throughout this case who tried to come forward with alternate scenarios. When the grand jury's findings came out, when the 4 pages was released, and Steve and I wrote a letter to the editor of the Denver Post saying that, this kind of points to another scenario besides Patsy did it, or it was an intruder, or Burke did it. And when we sent that to the paper, we received an anonymous letter to our house saying, "You don't know what you're talking about. Patsy did this." In other words,
mind your own business.
Yeah, in other words, back off. So that's why there's this sort of climate around this that you have to be careful what you say, and we have been, because there is an investigation ongoing right now with ex-law enforcement who are delving into other areas of this case the general public really doesn't know about. It hasn't been put on CBS. It hasn't been put on the television. These people are operating on their own, and we have to be careful what we say, and we're waiting to see what the results of their investigation is. Then we will update that ebook so that we will be able to say more of what we know.
The poems are they're the second one that Joyce was reading from is quite explicit in naming names and talking about child abuse, child exploitation, all of those things. And, this information, we conveyed all of this information to the police, the district attorney in Boulder. There were specific people one person in particular, who was in the legal system at that time, who had been convicted of a crime of child porn possession and distribution. And again, they just shunned any of this type of information. And that's the whole thing that sort of connects here with the city official. People tried to come forward and they didn't want it. With the poems, people tried to come forward, people who had knowledge of sort of the underground parts of Boulder that really hadn't surfaced. the authorities didn't want anything to do with it. The grand jury indicts the Ramseys on child endangerment, on putting their child in the circumstances that led to her death. Well, what does that mean? The district attorney didn't want anything to do with it. He not only refused to indict after asking the grand jury to work for 13 months, then they seal the report. So the public, which paid $2 million to get that report, essentially can't find out what's in there. I mean, the whole thing just speaks of we're not going to investigate this deeply, and we're going to sit on whatever information we have.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry for the noise you're probably both hearing in the background, but for sure. And I do encourage people to not only read the book, but really take notice of the sections with the poems. They are very well written. They are sophisticated. He quotes from W.B. Yeats throughout the poems, and does certainly present a very different, much darker picture of Boulder and the activities going on there. Speaking about this city official, there were rumors that you looked into that he might have been blackmailed, and that's why he was never fired. He denies that he was blackmailed during his conversations with you. But on that issue of blackmail, I have gotten several questions from listeners and stuff regarding blackmail and the possibility that John Ramsey might have known more about what was going on possibly at this secret Santa party that JonBenet would go to on Christmas. Maybe he had done this before and figured that it might have been okay. What do you guys think of the idea that John Ramsey might have known more, or that someone was trying to get to him, and that's ultimately what transpired? Any thoughts on that? Because I'm not totally sold on that. I know that some people, as I said, listeners have sort of brought that up to me before, that this could have had something to do with the arms industry that he was involved in, and corporate espionage. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think what you're looking at here is a very subtle set of circumstances, and that's why the case has been so hard to solve. I tend to believe that if there was anything that explicit going on, it would probably have come out, in the course of the last 20 years. I don't think it is that explicit. I think the Ramseys exposed their daughter to a number of different things, and I think they were extremely naive about what they were doing. And John has even made statements like that in his very small admissions in the last couple of decades. I think putting her in the pageant world like that, to go back to what Joyce was saying, the real sort of start of the inquiry that we had here, and again, it did not ever seem like the police were doing this kind of basic legwork that you would do in an investigation, was to go to the pageant mothers and hear things like, we had to get rid of certain people. There were judges that we didn't trust. This would be a magnet for pedophiles. There were people there that we weren't comfortable with, and we had to let them go. That kind of thing. I wouldn't let my daughter be alone with a pageant photographer because all he had to do was snap a couple of pictures, and he had a product to sell in the realm of child pornography. This is the kind of stuff, that we were hearing all along. So, I was told a story where Patsy Ramsey and one of the pageant mothers was in a photography studio in Denver, suburban Denver, prominent child photographer was there. There were pictures on the wall of girls who were, 10 years old. They were topless around that age. It's borderline. It depends on how you see that sort of thing. And Patsy was offended, according to the woman I spoke to, but she wasn't offended enough to do anything about it. I think the Ramseys' primary sin in this situation before the crime was having no awareness of what kinds of stuff was swirling around these activities. We talked to other pageant mothers, and some of them were a lot they wouldn't leave their daughters alone with photographers. They wouldn't expose them to certain things. So I don't think the Ramseys were directly involved in something of that nature, but I think they did let the child out to do certain things without an awareness of what was actually going on.
And they went on to say, some of the pageant mothers, that it wasn't just, say, necessarily photographers or people that attended the pageants, but look in all aspects of the pageants. Who sponsors them? Who are the judges at them? It just never seemed to us like it was looked at deep enough. And then, we continue to get people coming in through our website, stephensingular.com, and give us tips or leads or questions, or some anonymously, some not, and one person that called us. This photography angle never quite left us. It just seems like it's just followed us throughout the years. A business associate that we had in another state called us out of the blue one day and said that he had met a photographer, and this photographer had left the country and for 10 years and had some information that he wanted to share about the Ramsey case, but he was afraid. He left the country. He then gave us 3 names of people involved in the case, and he said, "Have you ever heard of these names?" And we had heard of them. So now we're getting corroboration from totally different directions. And it just kept leading us back, to that somebody knows something in that photography world and other aspects in Boulder.
And one of the pageant mothers told us, and this was, one of the experiences that we've had is that we were interviewing people in 1997, right after the crime. Some of those people were like us. They had small kids or kids who were still growing up. And they told you a certain amount, but they wouldn't go beyond that. They were afraid the crime had just happened. One of the pageant mothers, who was pretty close to Patsy, talked about conversations with one of the pageant photographers who said he was approached by people who wanted to use computer manipulation to take the heads of some of these girls in the pageant world right here, put them on other bodies, create a product, and sell it on the internet. So I mean, it was happening, right there and right here at that time. We asked that woman, who was interviewed by the police on numerous occasions and was a part of the investigation. Did the police ever talk to you about this? I mean, this woman was an absolute treasure trove of information about that subculture that JonBenet was in. They never asked her about any of that. They asked her, what kind of mother was Patsy? Did you ever see Patsy hit her child? Et cetera, et cetera. That was the focus of their investigation. Now, whether that was meant, limited because that's the only thing they could think about, or whether they were told to limit the investigation, is a good question. But once you get below the surface of this stuff, you see that this is the natural criminal realm that needed to be investigated. Who would present a threat to these kids?
Oh, and again, the way that the law enforcement, the politicians, even the Ramseys' close friends, the way that they all seem to kind of close ranks and shift blame to, it was John, it was Patsy, it was this, it was that. It was always sort of about, obscuring what the elephant in the room. On that same token, maybe you could talk a little bit about the mayor of Boulder, who at one point was fairly close with Patsy Ramsey, and then after the murder seemed to distance herself entirely from her. What any insight into that?
Well, it fits the entire pattern of everything that we're talking about. I mean, you have Patsy and John went on CNN, this very famous interview that they did on January 1st, 1997, about 5 days after the body was found. And Patsy was a total wreck and was saying things like, keep your babies close to you because, there are dangerous people out there. And the mayor instantly, fired back in a public setting, essentially saying there's no killer on the loose. Well, How would you know that? I mean, it's an unsolved case. It's 5 days old. You don't. There's no evidence for or against anything, and it's the same pattern that we've seen right from the beginning. What I just said. Hunter asks a grand jury to sit. We have reason to believe that the grand jury has some knowledge of the kinds of things that we're talking about, that they weren't merely looking at somebody in the Ramsey family or even just an intruder. Because if you look at their conclusion, that's what it implies. So the district attorney says, okay, do all this work for me, but I'm not going to prosecute anybody. Then in early 2000, a woman came forward from California and made some, very explosive statements about things going on in Boulder. And the district attorney then came forward and said, if Boulder PD won't look into this, I'm going to the U.S. Attorney's Office. We've got to get to the bottom of this. It's, endangering children, et cetera. 2 days later, changed his mind. Not going to do it. So the entire pattern is there. Then you jump forward to 2008, and you have a district attorney, Mary Lacey, clearing the Ramseys of the murder based on DNA evidence, new DNA. The Ramseys were never accused of murder. That's not what the grand jury conclusion was. How in the world can a district attorney clear them of that when they were accused of child endangerment? If all you have to do is add all that up, and it spells, we don't want to deal with this. We want to put it behind us, and we don't want to get to the bottom of what happened. And I think that Joyce and I have explored sort of the roots of all that. What causes a legal system to not want to solve a crime?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, on that note, maybe I'll direct this to you first, Joyce. But I mean, what's your take on the larger aspect of this? That the legal system did not want to solve this crime. That they did want to, at the very least, derail it enough to the point where it ultimately was just left unsolved, and then almost a decade later, they're cleared and stuff. But what's your take on that? From the standpoint of writing about true crime, but maybe as a larger issue of being a parent, being a mother. Why did it seem like they just did not want to solve this?
Well, this is all speculation, but based on what we have discovered for the last 20 years, it all points to some sort of knowledge of something by people in authority, and perhaps extortion, and perhaps blackmail, and things that were going on that could not have light shed on it, or people in higher positions could be implicated. For example, in one of the last lines says, "There are people involved in this with far more power than," and I have to leave that name blank. So that person also had the idea that something is going on there, that it could not be solved. After a while, it started looking to us like it wasn't so. I mean, of course, it's important who killed JonBenet, but it's equally important is that why can't it be solved? That's what we started focusing on. Why wasn't it solved? Why can't it be solved? Who's being protected? Who needs to be protected? That's what it appears to be, to us. Of course, we're like we said, we're speculating, but that's what everything that we have uncovered has led to, that conclusion. There's
a moment in the book, and this goes back sort of to your first question, I just remember this, where, I have spoken with that city official, and I went back to the district attorney's office and talked to him about that. And, he's the head legal official in the most prominent case in this region's history. And I told him a little bit about, what I'd heard about this guy and all of that. And he expressed some surprise. And then a few days later, he called me and said, "Can you come back into my office?" And I did. And he said, "What are you going to do with that information?" And I said, well, I'm not sure. I mean, it just depends on if it goes anywhere. And he basically said, if you do anything with that, it's going to look very bad for Boulder right now. And, I mean, it was the kind of subtle pressure that was just being implied that we don't need that kind of publicity. We have an image to protect. I'm going to basically, lean on you not to do that. It wasn't an inquiry into, well, who is this guy? Where might this lead? Should I have somebody look into it? It was very much the protection of Boulder's image. And I think that's really the part of the answer to the question that you're throwing out there. This thing was going, I think we both think if this thing ever blew, it was going to land on a lot of people on the periphery of these kinds of activities, people who may have been involved in them earlier. That's what the poems were implying. And because I think they felt they couldn't really contain the situation, so just shut it down.
No, and again, too, you make that point throughout the book, the idea of Boulder as this sort of elite liberal paradise where everyone is very wealthy, everyone has fun, everyone knows each other. And ironically enough, of course, John and Patsy Ramsey kind of break that mold a bit by being a bit more conservative, but being very religious, which, I guess people kind of attacked, Patsy at various times for being so religious. And they did kind of, I guess, stick out a little bit in that idea. But I did find that to be particularly fascinating, this idea of preserving, this lie of what Boulder is. And at all costs, at the cost of...
They also attacked Lou Smith for praying with Patsy. I mean, that just seems like such a low blow. It's, come on, maybe the guy has some heart. I mean, we knew Lou Smith. He was a very good man, a very good guy, very sincere, very, very big-hearted. But yet, they just totally dismissed his...
Well, he was also a very good criminal investigator.
Exactly.
And part of what he was doing was, trying to get close to them to learn something more about the case. And again, I mean, again, kind of repeating here, but it's part of the whole pattern. Alex Hunter brought Lou Smith in. He started developing new leads. The Boulder police didn't want them. Why? I mean, why would you not want the knowledge of probably the most experienced homicide investigator in Colorado? So there's a whole pattern there that's really held intact over the last 20 years.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it definitely still seems to be in place today, especially with the latest theory about Burke killing JonBenet over a slice of pineapple. And maybe we'll touch on that a little bit later. I did have a quick few listener questions that I'd love to get your take on. One is there any validity to the rumor that John Ramsey actually purchased plane tickets to Atlanta the night after the murders? Have you heard of this? Is there anything to this? I've seen it floated around.
Well, what happened was that, John Ramsey had a private plane, and they had plans to fly I think they were flying to Michigan, not to Atlanta, for the day after Christmas. And so what totally befuddled the police, and it's legitimate that they would be befuddled, is that the police are in the house on the morning of December 26th when it appears that, JonBenet has been kidnapped and there's a ransom note and all that's going on. And they see him sitting on the phone talking with the pilot of his private plane, sort of trying to make plans to get them out of Boulder. And the police approach and say, well, we don't really think you're going to be going out of Boulder tonight, sir. That's not what's going to happen. This is a murder or a criminal investigation. So, yes, he was talking to his pilot. He was trying to get out of town, and it's highly, highly suspicious behavior.
Another interesting little question or almost a comment is I was sent by a listener an article in, of all places, Anderson Cooper's CNN blog from back when this was all kind of coming out. But we have this Bill McReynolds, who was a former journalism professor who played Santa at the Ramseys, I think 3 years running. He was there on Christmas Eve, and he lived in the mountains. He was questioned at one point in relation to the murders. Have you heard the Anderson Cooper at least writes in his blog that McReynolds' daughter had been murdered or disappeared, and that he had also written a play about a little girl that is molested and killed. Any insight into that at all? Joyce, I'll throw it to you first.
Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead, and then I have something to say after you.
Well, his wife wrote a play that won a prize. It was, I can't remember the name of the play, but it was about a child that was kidnapped. And something did happen with his daughter, but I think she just was absent for a day or something, and I don't believe she was killed. His DNA
I might have been wrong on that,
in the case, and he was looked at pretty hard.
And he had a severe heart condition, too. I mean, he was... it would be hard for someone like that to carry something that vicious out. When it comes to the Santa Claus idea, though, we have heard through several different sources that JonBenet was told that she was going to meet with another Santa, a secret Santa, and it wasn't Bill McReynolds.
Right.
It was another one, and it was after Christmas, because somebody said to her, JonBenet, what are you talking about? Santa comes on Christmas Eve. No, this is a different Santa. He's going to come afterwards. She was very excited about this special Santa. That's who we think is totally different than Bill McReynolds.
Yeah, that would be a very fruitful area of investigation right there, if the authorities were so inclined, because she said that to three different people, and she was talking about the night she died. Who was she talking about? What was the location of the party? Who was there? What happened? That has been, verified pretty well as coming from her to different sources. So,
but it seems like people get that confused with the Bill McReynolds figure.
No, his all of his DNA stuff checked out. I think he'd had quadruple bypass surgery a few months earlier.
Pretty serious,
Yeah.
No, of course. I think as far as I know, McReynolds had an alibi, a pretty airtight alibi, the night of the murders as well.
And our whole thrust here, in case it isn't becoming clear, is that the killer of JonBenet Ramsey is unknown. We're not, when people put on $20 million, whatever it is, programs saying Burke killed his sister over pineapple, that's all well and good. But our point of view, to be clear about it, is that the killer left behind multiple DNA samples that did not come from the manufacturing of underwear or something like that. And if those multiple DNA samples could be matched to a perpetrator or a relative of the perpetrator, I think you would have something very, very substantial. So people like to say John did it, Burke did it, Patsy did it. Our point of view is that killer remains unknown.
To both of your knowledge, has the DNA that was found on JonBenet's underwear and on, I think, her leggings as well, has that been run through, like, the FBI's database or anything? Because, you'd like to think at least that, these guys do get sloppy, they do get caught, and, they might get a hit off something. Has it been run through any sort of national database?
To mine, I don't know the answer to that question. I know it's been run locally. I know that, but I do not know. I mean, you would assume that after 20 years, that would be the case, but I don't know that. And I would also speculate that the person who committed this crime very likely did not have a criminal record. I think this was people, engaged in activities with children that were not intended not only not to kill them, but not to, severely injure or do things like that. And I think something went terribly wrong, and this situation had to be covered up. And that is exactly what the grand jury concluded after 13 months of studying the evidence, that the Ramseys exposed their daughter to some situation which resulted in her death in first-degree murder, and then they subsequently participated in the cover-up of this crime. That's their conclusion, and that's very similar to what was being speculated upon and presumed guilty in 1999.
Oh, and just to kind of, agree with you there, Steve, we're tacking on a little bit. I think that most likely the individual or individuals involved in this probably didn't have a criminal record either, because they were presumably, and I'm speculating, powerful enough to make sure that they wouldn't have a criminal record, or that they wouldn't have been caught.
Right.
So, for whatever that's worth, that's something to keep in mind as well. Joyce, I'd like to get your take on this because, because in the alternative media, we don't get to talk to a lot of women or get a woman's perspective on things, let alone a mother's perspective on things. But if you could talk a little bit about the putting JonBenet's body in the basement, and again, we're coming from the perspective here that JonBenet was killed elsewhere and then her body was brought back there. But talk a little bit about the placing her in the basement and also Patsy's 911 call, because again, a lot of people make all of these assumptions about, listen to her inflection on this, and there's a little extra bit where that featured in the CBS docuseries.
I know what you're talking about. Voices in the background and all that.
Yeah.
Well, I really, from years of doing this type of work, I think it's a real mistake to try to assume that you know how other people will react when they go through a tragedy. And it was totally alarming to us when this crime first happened, and talk show hosts in the Denver, Boulder area were putting out all these types of, this kind of speculation. And to me, I felt it was really tainting the jury pool at that time if they had found someone, because you're putting out pure speculation on the airwaves to thousands and thousands of people saying, "Oh, yep, I know Patsy did it," and we just felt that it was really an abomination of justice to do that. Nobody knows what it would be like to be in that situation, and to have, and whether they had, again, speculation, whether they helped cover it up or whatever. You don't know what you how you would react, what you would do. When I see people say things like, "Oh, she was a good actress. She studied drama when she was in the pageants," that just makes my blood boil, because I think that's so presumptuous to think that you know how someone would react in that situation. People remember, there was that case of that woman down in Australia that her baby was taken off by the dingo dogs. And everybody was so sure that she did it. And then it came to be proven that the dogs really did take the baby out, And so I just think there's a real problem with jumping to conclusions without having a lot of facts.
There's an interesting, to me anyway, social dynamic in all that. And it's that in this kind of crime, which, is like the worst taboo that humans have, you're supposed to protect children and, get them into adulthood and all that. There's this knee-jerk response to blame something on one person. To say, the mother did it, she wet the bed, that's what this is about, case closed, the rest of us are off the hook. This has nothing to do with, exploiting the images of children or anything like that. And it always fascinates me how that just kicks in immediately, because if that's the case, you don't have to think about anything else. You don't have to think about anything we're talking about, that people do, in an almost organized way, do bad things to children, that they exploit their images, that they do things. When Joyce and I went down to that TV station and looked at that, I mean, all the bells and whistles went off. This is an entirely new criminal realm operating on the Internet, and it's worldwide, and people are talking about using their children in this to make money. And people don't want to think about that. So if the kid wet the bed, Patsy whacked her, that's it.
And I had to also remember that Patsy came from the South. She came from a different cultural climate about pageants. We think a little bit differently here in the North. At least in Colorado. I don't know what they feel about them in the East Coast, but it's a different sensibility, that pageant world. Grooming someone to become Miss America. That's very foreign than what I would do with my child. I would never, if I had a little girl child, probably the last thing I'd do would be to put her in a beauty pageant. But yeah. I understand that to a lot of Southern women, that's probably it was an okay thing to do. And then when I see it on television, still to this day, on Toddlers and Tiaras, there's still people that actually think that that's good for their children. I just think you don't know what's going on in somebody else's mind. That could be a cultural thing that you don't understand. You don't get. You can't put your values on them.
And I think that's what they were primarily guilty of, was being extremely naive about what they were doing with their daughter. So.
Oh yeah, and just also kind of adding on to this, the knee-jerk reaction, we have to blame the parent. That's so easy. It's funny too because in a lot of these cases, it had to be the mother, because of course she was crazy and the sort of hysterical woman syndrome that she couldn't handle this anymore, so she killed her kids. And we love to jump to those conclusions, yet bizarrely enough, we let so many of the parents that really do lose it and kill their kids, they get no time in jail, and children who are being abused by parents who commit the, patricide, kill their parents, they're given life in prison. It's this bizarre world where, we want to blame parents, but we don't want to punish them so much. Whereas, we don't want to give kids the benefit of the doubt, and we want to punish them no matter what. This is bizarre sort of environment, and again, back to the Southern mentality. I think that's something people need to just understand. The pageant world down there, in particular, very different. And Joyce, you were just mentioning that Toddlers and Tiaras. For people that don't know, there's the Honey Boo Boo, right, the reality star. And there, all sorts of horrific allegations about the guy that her mother was, bringing home at night, and that's why one of her older daughters is pregnant, because this guy was having some sort of illegal relationship with her daughter. Right,
and I'm not saying that all pageant mothers or all pageants are bad. I'm just saying there was a real difference between, like, say, the Boulder thinking about pageantry and maybe the Atlanta thinking of pageantry. It's a big difference. It's a big divide.
Right. And
absolutely.
When you study crime and, write about it over a long period of time, in book after book, you see a pattern of sorts. That if you set up a situation where something bad, really can happen. The first book I wrote was about the assassination of a Denver talk show host. You create a situation where people get together and spew, racial hatred, anti-Semitic stuff. Somebody shows up and something bad happens. We've looked at this more as a social crime than an individual crime. And there was plenty going on around those beauty pageants that could have created a criminal situation. And the whole thrust of, writing the book, revising the book, and everything was can we possibly look at this in a somewhat larger context? And I still think it needs to be done. I don't think law enforcement has ever wanted to do that.
And one more thing I'd like to add is that we've thought about it from this angle also. What if the killers or whatever group or whoever did this assumed that because the Ramseys put JonBenet out there, they put her out there in these costumes that to many appeared very sexual, the Las Vegas showgirl and all these other ones. What if the killer assumed that because the Ramseys put her in that situation and in those costumes, that maybe they, were sort of allowing whatever was going to happen. Maybe somebody got the wrong idea, and just maybe somebody didn't really realize it. To them, this is just pageant stuff, but maybe the killer or the killers thought, well, they put their child out there like that, she's there for the taking.
Right. Or we have heard stories of parents and children attending parties in Boulder where, these kinds of activities went on. I mean, maybe it's just sort of a nudist, something, people who are attracted to nudity, or people who are attracted to other things, or people who are attracted to photography.
Or people that think it's just art.
Yeah,
yeah.
And those things, have gone on. And like Joyce said, so you think, well, maybe the Ramseys are participating in something like that. We don't think that's true, but we think that she was exposed to people, who were at the very least potentially dangerous.
No, again, I couldn't agree more. Well, we're getting up towards the end of the hour. I don't know if you want to stick around for the second hour. So I do want to get your perspective on this. December 25th, that's going to be the 20th anniversary of JonBenet's murder. It doesn't feel like we're much closer to solving, although who knows? I think, with things like presumed guilty, there is some sort of a movement towards solving this. But the public doesn't seem to care so much, only in a simplistic way that Burke did it, end of story. And I guess I just wanted to get both of your perspective on that. Why is it that nobody seems to care? I understand that JonBenet was very sensationalized, and it became this almost titillating late night news program, reality show for people. But why is it that people 20 years on just don't care anymore? It doesn't concern them. They don't want to look at it. They don't, they only want to blame Burke now or something. Why do you think that?
Part of that is that, for example, our son, who's 23 now, his generation, the millennials, they don't seem to really care about the case like we who were around when it happened, They're, and because they are exposed via the internet, social media, to everything that you could possibly imagine and more, and not all good on the internet, it probably doesn't seem as important as it did to us back when the internet was in its infancy and this stuff was totally shocking. I mean, that's just my theory. What do you think?
Well, my take is maybe self-serving, but I think that when a network puts on a multi-million-dollar production that comes to a conclusion that there is absolutely no evidence of any kind to support it, nobody should care. It's meaningless, it's vapid, and it's empty, and it dumbs down the population even further. My experience of talking about the case with people like you or a few other people is they say, wow, I really haven't heard that before. I really didn't know about that. So if you give people, most people are pretty intelligent, if you give them something new to think about, if you can place it in some sort of context, I don't know if they care that much, but they start to listen and interact with the information, and some of it makes sense to them. So, I mean, there's a huge media component here. Again, if you, like Joyce was saying, you have people going on talk radio 2 days after this crime and pumping out Patsy killed her daughter. It's not only a violation of our entire legal system, it's just just totally irresponsible. Of course they have the right to free speech to do that. I think if things came out about this case in the way that we're talking about it, I think it would grab great interest in the population because they just don't know about this
I
stuff.
think so too, and I think that people will be surprised if and when the current investigation that's going on yields results. That I think people will start viewing this in a totally different way, and I think they're going to be very surprised.
Or if there was a DNA hit somewhere and it opened up some of these doors,
or that.
And we are fed a very thin diet here of news and information, despite what's out there. I mean, that's why your show is good. You've given us a chance to talk and to explore this. And what we're saying is it's an unsolved crime. The perpetrator isn't known, and we need to keep looking into it. So, we appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much for having us on, Pierce.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you guys.
And for keeping an open mind, for being open to, alternative theories. We really appreciate that.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. You guys are always welcome back on the show. Thank you, Joyce and Stephen singular.
Narcotics.
Freedom.
Oh, yes, I like very much.
Radio.
You're an American institution.
American Freedom Radio.
Are you feeling embarrassed and stuck because you can't focus or concentrate? I have a confession to make. I spent years unable to think clearly, like I was in a fog. I was going through the motions, running my companies, and I hated feeling groggy and mentally sluggish. I couldn't get ahead like this. It's no secret, the powers that be want us dumbed down. Chemicals, fluoride, our brains are under siege, and we are experiencing lower IQs. But now there's a weapon to fight back and win. Introducing DNA Evolve, a revolutionary breakthrough in a category of cognitive enhancers called nootropics. I've been using DNA Evolve and couldn't feel better. For me, it works. It feels great to get things done again and get ahead. Try a free sample for yourself at DNAEvolveSample.com. That's DNAEvolveSample.com. Supplies are limited, so go to DNAEvolveSample.com right now.
Did you know there are 3 million edible food plants on Earth, and none have the nutritional value of the hemp plant? HempUSA.org offers you hemp protein powder. It does not contain chemicals or THC, is non-GMO, and is 100% gluten-free. Hemp protein powder burns fat, builds muscle, contains 53% protein, and feeds the body the nutrients it needs. Call 888-910-4367 and see what our powder, seeds, and oil can do for you. Only at HempUSA.org. HempUSA.org introduces 3 brand new detox formulations of microplant powder. Brain Fuel for depression, bipolar disorders, and stress. Total Care, anti-cancer agent that cleans the liver and organs and increases memory. Rejuvenate, invigorates and heals the body, mind, and spirit. These products are your alternative to pharmaceuticals. Call 888-910-4367 and like us on Facebook. We ship worldwide. Only at HempUSA.org.
What about show business? Show business, completely dishonest, corrupt, and full of shit, but in a nice way. Plenty of expensive drugs and perverted sex. If you're going to be full of shit, might as well enjoy your work. Then you have the media. Not just the news media, let's include them all. The media are almost literally exploding with bullshit because they're located right at the crossroads of all the other bullshit. The media are made up of equal parts advertising, politics, business, public relations, and show business. These people are sitting right at bullshit junction. There's enough bullshit in the media for Texas to open a branch office. And you still have enough left over to start 2 law firms and a Christian bookstore.
What has American Freedom Radio ever done for us?
Provide us with free education?
Well, that's obviously effective, but apart from reversing the dumbing down of America...
All the information they provide is free?
What about the free podium for broadcast activists to speak from, man?
Exploiting commonplace corruption?
They help vulnerable people who don't have a voice?
Bringing light to important information nobody else does. Or they never censor, hang up, or cut off their guests.
Well, that's no fun, is it?
Oh, they created a fantastic alternative media source during an era of bad, manipulative, and infiltrated mainstream and alternative media shows and scam.
Okay, well, apart from the free education, free information, free podium for broadcast activists to speak from, exposing commonplace corruption, helping vulnerable people without a voice, bringing light to important information nobody else does, and creating a fantastic commercial-free alternative media source in a sea of bad, manipulative mainstream and alternative media shills and scum, what has American Freedom Radio ever done for us?
Donate to American Freedom Radio today.
No rules, no rules, no taboo topics, no fear of doom, We are American Freedom Radio, Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything. Geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to you live from New York City, your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the second hour of Porkins Policy Radio. I am your host, Pierce Redmond. You are, if you're just tuning in right now, thank you so much for tuning in to American Freedom Radio. I just realized I didn't even have the chat room open. So, if anyone is sending me messages, sorry, I haven't been looking. I'll try and pull that up right now. I just wanted to thank Stephen and Joyce Singular for joining me in the first hour. They couldn't stick around for the second hour, unfortunately, but I definitely will have them back on at some point. I'd love to get Joyce on and do maybe just a solo show with her, because she's just a wealth of knowledge as well. And I totally forgot to have them plug, but anyone out there looking for a fun Christmas gift, Stephen and Joyce have a brand new book out that they wrote together called Shadow on the Mountain, which is about a very interesting murder case that took place up in, I believe it's Aspen, involving a very prominent, I think he was a plastic surgeon, and his wife was, friends with all sorts of Hollywood celebrities and stuff. But very, very interesting book. And if you want to support Stephen and Joyce, you can, of course, buy a copy of that, or, of course, get a copy of Presumed Guilty, Stephen's book on the JonBenet Ramsey case. But I guess I'll start with just maybe some stuff that I didn't get to in terms of the JonBenet Ramsey case, just some little the update stuff that's just going on right now in the news. So we've mentioned several times in the last hour, and then when I was talking with Stephen, Burke Ramsey, of course, is the latest victim or the latest perpetrator, in air quotes, of JonBenet's killing, and he at one point is accosted even in the 3-part CBS docuseries called The Case of JonBenet Ramsey, where Jim Clemente, this real scumbag idiot, and his partner in crime, whose name is escaping me right now, Laura Richards, they actually go to Burke's house and they confront him, and they're screaming, "We need to talk to you! And Burke Ramsey is suing several people, but in particular Dr. Werner Spitz for $150 million in a lawsuit, claiming emotional damage and defamation and all these things, because of course in this docu-series, as they call it, Spitz is the main guy that theorizes that Burke, accidentally killed JonBenet with a flashlight when he beat her over the head with it because she had stolen a piece of his pineapple. Now, this is based, again, on absolutely nothing other than some pineapple being found in JonBenet's stomach, and a very, very cynical interpretation of some video interviews of Burke with a child psychologist afterwards. And of course, Spitz and Laura Richards, Jim Clemente, they go back and they look over these interviews where Burke is, and this is just in the aftermath of his sister being murdered, maybe raped or abused, molested in some way, being placed in the basement. Again, the interpretation of how this little kid acts when he's being asked these questions, and this isn't the body language of somebody that's remorseful or upset. And again, do you know how old was Burke? 8 years old or something? Do you know how an 8-year-old boy reacts after his sister is brutally murdered? No, I don't think so. I don't think you're really gonna be able to get into that little kid's head. So if he acts in a bizarre manner, that doesn't mean that he killed JonBenet because she stole his pineapple. And of course, you can ask the question: what if Burke had been abused in a similar? What if something had happened to Burke? Who knows if they exposed Burke to anything else? But anyway, Dr. Werner Spitz has responded to this $150 million lawsuit. He's trying to dismiss it. And Spitz seems to be kind of wanting it both ways when it comes to his comments. So he's arguing that it should be dismissed because it's merely speculation. It's his First Amendment right. It's not, there's no proof or anything. Well, at the same time, he completely stands by his theory. He's not backing down. And Jim Clemente and his crack team of investigators never portrayed this as speculation. Clemente and the program were hyped as this is going to solve the case. We absolutely know who killed JonBenet. It's about solving the case. And he would do that every time he was on, news shows or wrote articles and stuff. It was always, I know who did it. I can solve the case. So it's not just speculation, Dr. Werner Spitz. You were, quite clear about this. Just a little update on all of that. I'll follow that periodically. If any new information or anything like that about that comes up. But just something interesting. And again, as Stephen and Joyce have pointed out numerous times now, look at the grand jury report. Burke is never mentioned. And even if Burke had done it, which is highly unlikely, or if not impossible. He was too young at the time to have been tried for anything. So look at the grand jury report. And this is another thing that Stephen has mentioned to me, I think on the show and also privately before. If Burke had done it, why would his parents let him go to the White's house, Fleet White and his wife? That's where Burke was just after the murders. So your kid kills your daughter, you cover it up by making it this sort of sexual crime, all this, which is another aspect that they never want to explain. Well, okay, if Burke did it, why make it look in this sort of very sexualized nature with their daughter? Then why write the ransom note? Why do all this? I mean, there's a million things they could have done. They could have covered it up, all sorts of other ways. But so if Burke did it, they let him go to their friend's house where he's surrounded by strangers, where at any moment he could have slipped up and spilled the beans. He could have said an offhanded comment. He could have gotten nervous. He could have said anything, any number of things. That's never looked at. And again, if Burke did do it, why go to these lengths again with the posing Ramsey, JonBenet down in the basement with the garrote and all these other things? Certainly, too, the Ramseys were rich and powerful enough to hush this up and get Burke off. If he had done it, if he had really done it, I'm sure they could have figured out a way around this other than creating this gigantic media frenzy and, turning it into, the crime of the decade. So, a lot of BS on that front. And again, kind of feeding off of what Joyce and Stephen were saying at the end there, I think if this case if we do get a break in the JonBenet Ramsey case, if we like you said, if we get a hit on some DNA, or if this ongoing investigation, if they start to turn something up, I think people are going to be very surprised about where it actually leads. You're going to have a lot of people, on the internet, who, are just absolutely convinced Burke did it, Patsy did it, one of them did it. They're going to have to sort of, grow up a little bit. They're going to have to, actually kind of look at this truthfully and look at this in a realistic approach. And I think, again, that's a very good thing, to, especially in a case like this, where you're talking about children being abused and whatnot. We need to kind of look at this like adults, and not go to the knee-jerk, oh, well, she wet the bed, so her mother brutally killed her and then, covered it up. Or, Burke is a psycho, and that's, again, the implied assumptions here. Is that Patsy is the psychotic, classic hysterical woman, and she couldn't handle JonBenet wetting the bed, and people have even made these horrific, references to Patsy's breast cancer, and that she's jealous of JonBenet, and all of that kind of, again, that women are just these crazy psychopaths that just kill their kids for fun. And then the same thing with, poor Burke. He is the classic, psychopathic, child who, kills his sister and, doesn't even bat an eye about it. These are these, like, I don't know what they are, these ideas, these memes that have been implanted in our minds, about, mothers and sons or daughters or, children in general that, again, that, obviously those sorts of people do exist, unfortunately. That's the world that we live in, but, it's not always so clear cut. It's not always so easy. And again, just you look up the statistics on those sort of things. Parents, particularly mothers, they do kill their kids. Sometimes we always hear these horrible stories about some mother who drowns all her kids or something, and they always get off, They go to rehab, as an alcoholic or a drug addict, and, they go for counseling, and then they're gone. Whereas you get a kid, there's actually a really good, one of the few good PBS Frontline documentaries that they've made, in many, many years, was about the kids children that get life in prison. And the statistics on that are phenomenal in that so many kids that do commit murder, and usually, of a parent, it's because they were being abused and they could no longer take the abuse anymore. So they killed their father, mother, foster parents, whatever, to stop the abuse. They get life in prison. They throw away the key. They don't want to have anything to, these are disgusting people, disreputable scum that need to be locked up forever. So again, something to just think about, when we're looking at, cases like JonBenet or just in general. Again, the way that we view, these people, we always want a very, easy, clear-cut answer. Again, like, some, recent, scandals that, shall remain nameless. But anyway, I do want to get off of, some of this stuff, because I know it is depressing. I know that people, last week, it did have some, just massive, technical difficulties. We lost the last half an hour of, the radio show last week, which is actually a godsend, because I, was just, basically ran out of things to say, and was just sort of really talking out of my ass. Probably was not fun for Danny on the other end, having to listen to me drone on. But the radio gods did curry favor with me, and we lost the last half hour. But the majority of that show was about, again, the CIA and modern art. And I know people I got a lot of emails and comments and stuff. Thank you for covering something a little bit lighter, a little bit less heavy as like with fucking pedophilia and child murder and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's important to do, and you need a break from all of that. But it did get me thinking again on, I think the stuff that I'm most passionate about, that I'm most really excited about, is again the relationship between the state and culture. And of course that's manifested mainly with the CIA in Hollywood, but there's lots of different layers to that, and I do enjoy that a lot. And on that note, over Thanksgiving, I was told by my uncle we were talking about a bunch of different things, and somehow, of course, the CIA in Hollywood came up. I think he'd asked me a question about the podcast and about this writing project that I'm on. I was telling him, and then he mentioned to me that even he has sort of noticed the more overt sort of stuff with that is even he on a daily basis has noticed the Pentagon and CIA and that stuff. And he was telling me about this show on the History Channel. If I don't know how it still calls itself that, but one of the more ridiculous shows on the History Channel, Hunting Hitler. I don't know if anyone out there in the audience has heard of this show, but it features Bob Baer, of all people, former CIA officer Bob Baer. And my uncle was shocked. He was, what the hell is this guy doing? What, they gave him a show, and I guess there's already been one season previously. But the premise is, of course, classic History Channel conspiracy crap. And that's like all that History Channel just churns out now. But, it's like Bob Baer, and he's got this, famous, international criminal lawyer who, he worked at The Hague. I'd love to see what he really did there. But anyway, it's him and Bob Baer, and it's more or less based around a lot of these recently declassified FBI reports on Hitler's whereabouts. Predominantly in Argentina, but in other places as well. And it is true, yeah, the FBI did have lots of reports of, sightings of Hitler. There's some weird testimony at the Nuremberg trials from certain people. And of course, I don't think I'm throwing any new information out there to the audience. I'm sure they've all heard of the idea that Hitler escaped. But anyway, Bob Baer and his crack team, they've been investigating this now. And I actually, after my uncle told me about this, I almost couldn't believe him. And I misunderstood what he was saying at the time. I thought he was saying, Bob Baer is like featured. I thought it was like one of because of course History Channel, every 5 minutes, if they're not talking about like Oak Island and Ancient Aliens, they're talking about something to do with the Nazis. So I figured this was just another one of their, Hitler shows, and Bob Baer was there. But no, he is like the host of it's his show. And like I said, it's classic History Channel conspiracy bullshit. Every clue, in air quotes, is like a smoking gun that they freak out over. All the episodes are sort of designed as cliffhangers to keep people watching. I happened to flip it on after my uncle had told me about it. And, first almost, dropped my beer out of my hands because there's Bob Baer, and he just, every time, if you haven't, followed Bob Baer maybe as closely as I have, but every time he's on TV, he looks like he's aged about, 30 years more than he should have. He looks like perpetually tired, like he never sleeps. And of course, and all Bob Baer wants to talk about is, CIA, blah, 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 and George Clooney played me in Syriana, and, I love George Clooney. He's always going on about, he's one of those CIA people that just, always wanted to be in Hollywood. And of course, he's found his in. But, in the episode I saw, it ends with, this, just the most irritating British historian you've ever seen. And damn, his name is escaping me now. You can look up the Hunting Hitler on the History Channel. You'll find him. He's this, short, tubby British historian who used to work for like Sky and BBC, and he, he's always walking around with one of these like thin scarves that you see that serves no purpose. He's walking around Argentina in the summer, sweltering, and he's got this stupid little scarf on. It's his like attempt at looking hip or something. I don't know. But it's him, and of course the ubiquitous Special Forces operative, this guy Tim Kennedy, who I did do a little bit more research on him. But Tim Kennedy is the Special Forces guy. He claims he hunted Bin Laden, and that's what qualifies him to go investigating if Hitler is still alive. And the two of them are there. They've got their translator, who looks like some, little hipster shit that they found out in Buenos Aires or something. So they're there in the house with this guy, and his father is he was in the Luftwaffe, and emigrated to Germany emigrated to Argentina sometime after the war, like many Nazis and Germans did. And he shows him he's got this, like the Iron Cross, and he's got 2 of them. So his father was, very prominent. And then this is the thing they do that's very interesting. They really kind of start like, turning up the flame with this guy. They really start pushing him and pressing him really hard. And the British, historian is, gets very sort of huffy and puffy, and they, you need to tell me this sort of stuff now. A lot of people, they don't want to talk because, the Nazis, and you need to tell me, and he keeps sort of saying that. And then there's this long, dramatic shot on this, Argentinian German guy, and it looks like he's about to start crying. Then he walks over, and he gets up and he walks away. And of course the British is, what's that about, huh? Where's he going? It's like, relax, buddy. Okay. He's like in the same room as them. And he walks over and he pulls out this, like a manila envelope or something, or it looks like a, what do they call them in England? A jiffy bag. But it's like a manila envelope that's padded in the inside, like for shipping. And he takes out some picture that we, of course, shot so that we never see it. And he hands them to them. And, Tim Kennedy and this, historian, what is this? And they're very accusatory. And he says, oh, that's Adolf Hitler in the 60s. And then, they start freaking out and they're looking at the picture. But of course, we never get to see the picture. They never show it. It's always obscured. At any moment when you might just get a glimpse of it, that's actually censored. And of course, that's how the episode ends. And, the game is on. Now we know that Hitler, is in Argentina. And, and that's how that episode ends. And I'm not sure if the 4th episode is out yet. But anyway, where the hell am I going with this, right? Babbling on, about, hunting for Hitler and British historians and special forces guys. Well, I think it's fair to say that, on one level, the media wants us to be obsessed with conspiracy theories. And shows or networks like the History Channel, they love this. They love, like I said, they love things like, Ancient Aliens. They love, Oak Island. There's been an Oak Island reality show, on History Channel for a couple of years now. They love this kind of stuff. They love putting that out there. But at the same time, I think it's also fair to say that the CIA is signing off on this on some level. I think Bob Baer has a very complicated relationship with the agency, because he does run his mouth and he is seen as a conspiracy theorist. He famously told, We Are Change about, a friend of his at the agency who, a few days before 9/11 told him to, cash out his stocks on American Airlines. But, and he even mentions in Hunting Hitler in an earlier episode, there's a whole part where he's, I'm not really a conspiracy theorist. And he actually says, I'm not a truther. But, I want to solve these sort of things. I'm driven by the evidence. That's what I did at the CIA. Again, presumably the CIA, they sign off on these sort of things, despite what Bob Baer says. And Bob Baer is the one that will, swear up and down on a stack of Bibles. No, I'm out of once you're out of the CIA, that's it. I have no contact with them. I don't do anything for them. They never ask me for stuff. Complete BS. I mean, nobody, I don't even think he doesn't even try to make that, believable when he says it. But so the CIA is signing off on this. The Pentagon is certainly signing off on this with this Tim Kennedy character, the special forces guy. I think the CIA will give a little bit more leeway in terms of, their former agents doing stuff. But as far as the show is portraying it. This guy Tim Kennedy is like active special forces. Okay, sorry about that, guys. The call dropped on Skype, but where was I? Oh, right. I was saying. So they're signing off on this. They want us to at least be fascinated by at least certain conspiracy theories, but I think in a larger sense, they also want us, in general, to embrace conspiracy culture. And this is also another one of these sort of mainstreaming of the conspiracy culture, of the alternative media. It's another attempt. And that's really what, a show like Hunting Hitler is about. Especially when you've got the inclusion of people like Bob Baer, who alone should just sort of raise all sorts of alarm bells. And again, and is someone who, for a lot of people out there, is is a member in a way of the conspiracy culture. So that's what's so fascinating about this. But more importantly, more broadly, I think what a show like Hunting Hitler, and a lot of these shows are really about. These shows where you've got some sort of weird conspiracy theory, but you've also got CIA, Pentagon characters, and and other shady characters sort of floating around in the mix of all that. Is that they want to have the conspiracy culture not only under the control of the state, okay? Because ultimately, what is a show like Hunting Hitler really saying? It's saying that some kind of combination of the CIA, the DOD, and this gaggle of weirdos, historians, international crimes lawyers. They've got a guy on the show there that they refer to as a human hunter. It's like, what the hell? That's who they want solving these mysteries. They want it to be the state that is solving these. It's Bob Baer, former CIA agent. He's who finds where Hitler's true grave is with the help of his, Pentagon assistant. And in another level, I think they want it to be this, not only it's the state solving the case, but they want us to, employ the state's methods in solving this. They want us to follow the same sort of protocols that they are following in a show like Hunting Hitler. So what do I mean by that? Not only do they want us to revere these hallowed institutions as the only ones that can really solve something like Hitler's alleged escape to Argentina, but by having us watching it, they're also reinforcing that this is how we solve these sort of crimes. So future. Sorry about that, guys. The call dropped on Skype, but so they really do hype it up to this incredible level of urgency and life and death. So it's like I said, every single clue is a smoking gun, and they never take a moment to think. They find the picture of Hitler, boom, next shot. It's being sent to Bob Baer, and they're looking at it. Oh, now we got to go and fly out to Argentina and oversee all of this. So again, that's a component of television. They are making a TV show. We can't necessarily fault them for that. But, they could as easily have made a longer form documentary, right, on the History Channel even, where not everything is like life and death. Because again, that's not a healthy way to go about investigating something. It clouds your judgment. It makes it very easy for you to jump to conclusions because it's life and death. If you don't, it's also, let's be realistic here. Hitler's dead. Okay. Even if he escaped, he's definitely dead at this point. He poses no threat to anybody. The people that might know something, they're still going to be there tomorrow. Okay. So we don't need to do that. The other thing that I think very fascinating in the way that again the state sponsorship, the the government or the CIA that they want us to embody as conspiracy theorists is that we shouldn't be acting like researchers, but as interrogators. So again, throughout, Hunting Hitler, particularly in the episode that I turned on, I mean, they're not conducting an interview with some citizen of German extraction. They're interrogating them. They're demanding, you need to start telling me the truth right now, okay? Did your father know Hitler? And it makes them look silly and crazy. But again, I think those sort of ideas seep into the subconscious of the conspiracy theorist. Or at the very least, people watch Hunting Hitler and they say, that's what conspiracy theorists are like. They don't act like people doing research. And again, that's also that's not how you get information. I'm positive Stephen and Joyce would never encourage people to act as, police-like interrogators if you're questioning someone you want to get information from. That's not how you're going to get information. It's dangerous too. Okay, you might be in a situation doing research that's a little dicey. You don't want to start accusing people. You don't want to start demanding things. It's just stupid. You're not going to get anywhere with that. So, yet they want us to kind of, I think they want us to do that. They want that to be the sort of way that we view conspiracy research, conspiracy culture. And I think it's twofold. I think it's partly they know that some of, that crowd is going to watch these shows. They might pick up on some of these ideas and employ them later on. And I think it's also a way of, people that are watching this purely for entertainment to kind of laugh at the conspiracy theorists, to laugh at us, And again, to, this is the thing. People might say, oh, no, but, they're doing it for the TV, they're doing it for this and that. Trust me, spend a few moments or an hour or so on YouTube. You're going to find a lot of people that sound just like these nut jobs or these, idiots. I guess they're not nuts. I mean, they're, but these idiots on Hunting Hitler, they sound just like, the people out there trumpeting whatever the latest conspiracy theory is. Again, with this is truth. This is the truth. You are not seeing it. You don't understand. Don't you get it? It's right in front of you. Just like on Hunting Hitler. Constantly doing that. Again, the way that they demand that people tell them, you have to tell me the truth right now. See that all the time, in the YouTube personalities and other places like that. So what is going on here? Are we being fed this, or is this an experiment? Is this a way to see if they can manipulate us through things like Hunting Hitler, like a History Channel documentary, which again is probably, I don't think most of my listeners are necessarily watching Hunting Hitler. If you are and, you don't like it, I'm sorry. But at the same time, who is turning onto it? Who is listening to this kind of stuff? And how is that seeping into our subconsciousness? And if it's not an experiment, is it an operation? Are we being fed this and we're being led into a particular direction where suddenly we all start emulating, the Bob Bears of Hunting Hitler or, the accusatory, nature that some of these, historians and special forces guys employ. So, I think we should be aware of that. Obviously, Hunting Hitler, it's kind of a silly show. I will say, there's no doubt some strange stuff went on during the final days of the Nazi, or the downfall of the Nazi regime. Is it possible that Hitler escaped? Absolutely. I'm sure that I think it's plausible. I think the whole issue of who found his body, why was it moved to Russia, then back again, that doesn't make, there's issues with that. I think the Martin Bormann stuff is very odd. This is Hitler's second in command, and his body was I guess never really found. And there were various the CIA and the German government were involved in trying to find his remains back in the 60s, and they couldn't. And then a few or a decade or so, or a few years later, they did find it, but then it turned out not to be him. That is very odd. And of course, Nazis in Argentina and South America, that's just a fact. They are there. But again, that's sort of interesting stuff, the stuff that is fascinating, that is worth spending our time researching into. Like so many of the topics in the alternative media, you may not, there might be whatever is the latest sort of chic thing to talk about in the alternative media, and there's a whole host of things right now that are. Within that, there are interesting aspects, and there are aspects that do deserve our attention and our time. The same way, maybe not Hitler, but Martin Bormann, or just the fact that Nazis were escaping. Were we, the amount of Nazis that the CIA was scooping up, how many of them were they just letting go to South America? That is interesting. But instead, the argument or the motive and the way that we go about it all becomes controlled and dictated. Unfortunately, with the, hunting Hitler, it's being dictated by a former CIA agent. Okay, with a very particular set of agendas and a very, a particular set of protocols. And I do think those sort of things do trickle down. I think that it's, you do a show with a bunch of Nazi hunters, okay, fine. But you do a show with a former CIA agent as bizarre as Bob Baer, okay, who said some really, he says these 9/11 truth things, but then in the same hand he also says that, Iran is behind 9/11. He claims he's not with the CIA. I'm gonna make this very pro-CIA movie called Syriana. There's something there, okay? There's definitely something more to that. And Bob Baer knows full well that a lot of people are going to tune in to watch him because he's a former CIA agent. There's cachet. There's value in having him on your show. And by having him on your show, or him having an outlet such as a show, he can create whatever kind of environment he wants. So suddenly you've got these people who, you've got a historian, okay, who's out there. And the guy is, I should have looked up his name at some point. But he's written lots of books. As I said, was at one point well respected. Sky News, BBC. He doesn't act like a historian doing research. Okay, he acts like a bully. Okay, who interrogates people for information about their, and he's always going, about how sick and twisted the Nazis are, and of course no one's denying that, and there's too much of praising them in the alt media. But again, that's not how you're going to get information out of these people, okay? By bitching and moaning about how your mother was a Nazi collaborator and she's an awful, evil person, and demanding the truth. That's not how you get information. That's not how we as people within the alternative media, the conspiracy culture, that's not how we should approach this stuff. Because what does it do? It clouds our judgment. Okay, we become so obsessed, we become so angry, and everything becomes life and death, and we start making assumptions, and we start drawing, the dots and connecting the lines to things that are not necessarily there. Or that might be there to a degree, like I said, with, some weird stuff going on with the Nazis in the final days of World War II, but not necessarily what Bob Baer and the CIA and the Pentagon want us to be looking into. And and again, the irony of having a CIA guy trying to hunt Hitler when, come on. He could call up one of his damn friends in the agency and just ask, where was Hitler? Okay, if he wasn't in the bunker, somebody at the CIA has got to know that. Okay? And again, it's very rich from him. Again, this organization that did everything they could to protect the Nazis, at the end of World War II, and recruit all of them either into America's intelligence network or into NASA, or like Reinhard Gehlen, and we'll just use him and his whole Nazi network, and we'll create the new. The Democratic German Intelligence Agency, the BND, all that is birthed out of Galen's network. So, very fascinating, I think. And again, because a show like that on the History Channel, I think it does kind of fly under the radar. We don't realize the influence that it's having. And, the broader aspect to all of this, of course, is that's what makes this state-run propaganda so insidious and so fascinating to look at, because they're so clever about it. They're able to take a silly show like Hunting Hitler, and I think they are influencing people, and the prevalence and the proliferation of reality shows and docudrama series, everything now is like a docudrama or whatever, or these, people love now these long form, true crime documentary series, like Making a Murderer and, or, even the Paradise Lost, the, West Memphis 3, documentary series. People love this. People love, glomming onto these things. And I think they like them in part because it's kind of like, history is in the name of the channel, so it can't be all bad, right? And so, it's you can kind of get away with that, but at the same time, it's entertainment. But I think they are using shows like that as a way of, implanting certain ideas, implanting certain behaviors that they would like for us to emulate. And, so just, before you go around poo-pooing, Hunting Hitler, and the way it operates, I think really, you take a look at how we are operating, as a community. Because I think we'd be very surprised to see that a lot of the rhetoric and the tactics and the language that we use is coming straight out of these shows. And I don't think it's necessarily the other way around. I don't think that the conspiracy culture is influencing. I mean, we are influencing, unfortunately, I think we're influencing it too much, because now, there are certain stories that we kind of lose control of, and they become part of the mainstream media narrative, and they become controlled, and they become discredited, and it goes for discrediting other people, and you can read between the lines about what I'm saying in terms of all of that. But I think they're influencing us to a much larger degree. As we've seen with the amount of conspiracy shows out there, and not just reality shows or the, docudramas, but just the, straight regular dramas, and the way that the way even just that the term conspiracy theory is bandied about now. Now it's almost gone to, it's no longer like a dangerous word to say. Now it just means some idiot, It's not that the conspiracy theory in and of itself is a dangerous thing, It's more like this is the word that we now use to define a bunch of morons. And I'm not saying that's true or right or good, but that's how I think the mainstream narrative has sort of come around to all of that. And a lot of this goes back to shows like Hunting Hitler. Look up some of the stuff Tom Secker and I have done on this. And you can look up the documents, these Pentagon reports. Why, the Pentagon is getting involved in cupcake wars. Why do you think that is? Why is the Pentagon meeting with, all sorts of, not just movie executives, but agents, and agencies that represent the vast majority of movie stars and things like that. Why is the Pentagon writing up these reports talking about they want to get more involved in the developmental level of films? But even back to the broader point of, why is the Pentagon working on Cupcake Wars? Again, because I think it injects a lot of ideas into those shows where it's all about competition. It's all about beating someone else. It's about being the best, about being number one. And, and in a lot of those shows, it's kind of about, bending the rules just a little bit, kind of pushing the boundaries of what's okay and what's not, And ultimately, well, it's fine because we won. We beat that other cupcake guy. And again, these are all ideas that the state wants us to feel comfortable with, and in some ways it's all ideas that the state wants us to use in our own life. It wants all of us. It wants us to compete about everything. It's not just about making the best cupcake. It's about competing for nearly everything. Everything has become a competition. We don't trust our neighbors anymore. Everyone's out to get us. All these sort of things. I know I'm kind of going off on a whole bunch of different tangents here, but all of this, I think, is part of a larger strategy, and we do need to kind of take a step back and see this, and also at the same time unplug. Don't watch endless reality shows and schlocky TV like that. Know when to kind of turn all that stuff off, but also just be aware of it. I say all of this as again a cautionary tale to just sort of be aware, take a step back, take a deep breath, look at this, look at how we're reacting to certain stories, and wonder, is this the desired outcome? Is this what the whole conspiracy was about from the very beginning? Regardless if it's true, if it's not, if there's aspects of it that are false or whatever, none of that really matters at the end of the day when it snowballs into this much scarier reality, which will have a very particular and predetermined response, and ultimately we're going to still be the victims of it. So I leave you with that sort of an idea, and I will say, if you want to waste some time, maybe have a beer, maybe smoke a bowl or two. Hunting Hitler can be fun to watch. If nothing else, for the way that they just, lose their shit over like nothing. They like, there's a tremendous scene where they're just sort of wandering through the, I forget where they are. They're wandering through the woods or something, and it's like the littlest thing. They'll see something that might almost look like it could be a swastika, and this is getting real, guys. This is getting super, super real. That's what they're always saying too. It's everything is getting real. This isn't a game. This is real. This is, very powerful stuff. And again, the impact that I think that has on culture, particularly the conspiracy culture, very important to understand. But anyway, I'll stop with that rant for this week. I do want to quickly thank all of my subscribers on Patreon. If you are not already a subscriber and you would like to support my work, then you can, of course, visit patreon.com /Pierce Redmond, or you can also find that on my website. So you can become a patron of mine for as little as $1 a month. If you subscribe at the $5 level, you will, of course, get access to the bonus podcast. If you subscribe at the $3 level, you also get to ask me a question. So please do send in your questions. I don't get as many as I'd like. But anyway, thank you all so much for subscribing. So thank you, Arnar, Jason, Josh, Jacob F., Sally, Howard, Dick, Simon, Jake, Jess, Jacob W., Vim, Walter, Peter, Lee, Hassan, Janice, Quentin, Pamela, Arthur, Matthew, JC, Ben, and Marianne. Thank you all so much for being subscribers on Patreon. And just to say that list is in no particular order. That's just the list that that Patreon brings up. So, I love all of you equally over on Patreon. And quick reminder, the bonus podcast, I do the bonus podcast. I had recently I had on Brian Heiss, who's of course a frequent guest on the show, and Brian was on to discuss very interesting developments again in the O.J. Simpson trial. Brian has actually gotten a full copy and digitally remastered Nicole Simpson's infamous 911 call back in October 25th of 1993. This is the famous call where you can hear O.J. yelling in the background. Brian has cleaned this up, and he's been nice enough to allow all of my $5 subscribers access to his video and the transcripts of the call. He's put together a great video, like...
News and information you can trust. This is American Freedom Radio. Freedom, American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.